and welcome to today's episode on the Moving from Fear to Trust series. I am so excited to be joined today by Grace Blacksea, who is a systems strategist and wellness coach. And we met each other online on Instagram. So I am so excited to introduce you to Grace and her work. And I am so excited to have this conversation myself because I think it is absolutely fundamental that, we're saying, bringing this kind of awareness into the conversation that like the corporate world and the way that we're working, this constant doing, constant emphasis on like output isn't sustainable. But then it's kind of like, well, what does it actually look like? Like how can we actually create systems that are going to support our well-being, but also support like the practical runnings of businesses and companies and schools and all the kind of the physical stuff that we have to do as humans. So Grace, I'm so excited to have you here today and to explore this with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Yeah, so take me back to 12 years ago when you were making an exit yourself from where you were working in the corporate world.
Yeah, it feels like eons ago now. I was just thinking about it this morning, actually. And it's crazy how I started in the event industry right out of high school. I mean, I was a production assistant for they called it at the time like a boutique event company, which meant that we did everything kind of under the sun in the way of weddings and small parties. And that, of course, grew really quickly. And it was great starting at that kind of stage zero of being a production assistant, if you will, just because I got to do everything. I was on the truck unloading furniture and floral and decor all the way to, helping talent gear up before they went on stage. It was kind of a little bit of everything. And then it was really crazy because I was with them when the recession hit, and all of a sudden people were not spending money in the US on things like parties and events and so on and so forth. And so it was just a really interesting time to be a part of it and watch that kind of really, really decrease. And then all of a sudden, a few years later, it just came right back, which was, it felt pretty good. Of course, it was so sad to see so many of, vendors I worked with and that sort of thing go out of business. But it was also so humbling too, to see that people who had been in this industry that maybe kind of did them wrong in the way of, their businesses shut down and they had to fire employees, that sort of thing. And then they really kept at it. And so I had always, from a very, very early age, worked for these really strong female entrepreneurs. And with that, though, I was just expected to hustle, and I was expected to do everything that I possibly could to prove myself to move to the next level of whatever that was. Yeah. So I moved to the Southern California area about 9 years ago now, and I jumped right back into events the second I landed here, and it was just something that was in me. I think that as a young girl, I always thought to myself, I want to plan those big events, those really big events, like the ones that have these huge impacts, like the Academy Awards. And I don't know really what I thought that meant when I said plan, but of course I really learned what that meant as I got into it. So I went from the wedding industry, planning and working on over like hundreds of weddings, into the corporate event industry. And of course, there was always like this culture around hustle, just because, especially as a female, having to prove yourself. And but again, it was always like fueled and geared by these very powerful females that were in the industry. And I don't know if that always set the best example, but I definitely had some guiding lights through that. And then, and then I just about 5 years ago, I got into doing just specifically in singularly those corporate events. And when I was in that space, I was carrying a workload of doing $2 million of events every single year. I was carrying 12 events at a time. I mean, it was the kind of work, like emotionally, mentally, and physically, that I had no idea that I was capable of. And then also that it was something that I actually didn't want to be a part of. Like, I didn't want to be a part of something that really broke me down. So throughout that journey, I think it was really sad to me, and it took a lot to realize that this dream job that I thought that I wanted so badly, all of a sudden was this thing that was eating me alive. I mean, I couldn't sleep because of stress. I didn't sleep because I had so many deadlines and so many things due. I didn't take weekends off. My health was rapidly declining. I was running a lot to manage my stress, and that meant that I wasn't fueling my body properly, and I was probably, definitely on the malnourished side. I was fueled by nothing but caffeine for the most part, and it was just this cycle that my body could not keep up with until I literally had a physical breakdown. So I'll never forget the day when my now husband came to me and said, what if you just left? What if you just did it? And I said, well, I can't do that. I mean, I can't do that. And I realized I was so caught up in like what that meant to be successful or professional or whatever level, again, of success that meant that I was building for myself. I didn't realize that there was another side to that like I could be successful and not be stressed out and not be sick. So that was that kind of like the catalyst of my journey of when I finally did decide to leave the corporate world and realize that there is another side to it, and you can be wildly successful and still have your health and still and not subscribe to that hustle culture and work until there's a breakdown. You can actually do a lot to get in front of those kinds of things.
I love that. And so during that time, was there any specific like role models that you were looking to that were actually speaking about this, like actually taking care of your well-being whilst also being like wildly successful? Was there anyone in particular that really stood out for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, I had been surrounded by a few guiding lights along the way, and some of them were in the event industry and some of them were, believe it or not, the one that was standing in front of me the whole time was my mom. She later on in life received her yoga certification, and she learned all about meditation and movement and that sort of thing. And that was something that I didn't, like my answer back when she would tell me like, why don't you just sit and breathe and take a break throughout the day and walk outside and just be really aware of the outdoors and just turn your phone off for a little bit and just turn the lights off in your office and just relax and don't take any phone calls for an hour. And that gave me so much anxiety. I mean, and those were, she was trying to hand me tools to actually like deal with my day and the daily stress that went on. So that was right in front of me. And of course I just pushed that aside because my answer back to her was, I don't have time for that. I don't have time,
I know.
And it's like, make time for the things that matter. And I was not prioritizing myself. But absolutely. I had always, people at that point, this was kind of like, I feel like right before the big jump in me, subscribing to being like aware of and open to personal development, because I very obviously was so closed off to that. I think at that time I was subscribed more to, things like fast tracking my fitness, like whatever I could do really, really fast to get results, because I didn't have time for anything else. But the second I did shut that down, I would say that there's people like Marie Forleo, for example, that popped up in my life, and Gabby Bernstein and that sort of thing. And then I had some local instructors. Of course, when I actually took the time to go to those local yoga classes, there was a few instructors that really came front of mind to me and made it okay for me to like be at a yoga class at 8 a.m. versus be at my desk, kind of thing. So those were some big names. And then of course, as the years have gone on, I have a whole entire like tribe of women that I subscribe to. Yeah.
Amazing. And so, so like in terms of, so you left that space, like what did you decide to do then in terms of like work, and like did you go into do training in like what you're doing now? Like what was the kind of next step from that point?
So the next step was finding myself. I mean, I think I had completely and totally lost who I was. And I'm not even sure at that time, being in my 20s, I mean, like that's such a defining time to define yourself, really. I mean, and I wasn't doing that. I was just trying to, again, I was trying to subscribe to this hustle culture because I thought that's what it meant to be this like strong, successful woman. And so I needed to redefine what that meant. Like, what did success look like to me? What did happiness look like to me? And so when that happened, this is like Quench, the platform that I now, run for female entrepreneurs is it happened quite quickly after all of this. It looked a lot different 5 years ago though. So what happened was I quit my job and I had decided to take 6 months off. I was just going to go through life, figure out what I was doing, really decompress from the years in the event industry. And I was sitting around in the middle of the day in our, 1-bedroom apartment, and I'm looking around and I look outside and I had seen a lot of, we had a lot of potted plants in our backyard. And of course those had been neglected because I didn't have time to take care of them. And so I went outside and I just kind of started gardening. And here in California, we have like the perfect climate for cactus and succulents. And so I had all these overgrown pieces. And what was so cool about the succulents is that you could propagate them and take them from one plant and they would grow into another. And every single day when I would go outside and put my hands in the dirt, I would like find a little bit of another piece of myself. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And of course, very quickly, fast track to like 6 months later, my entrepreneurial spirit kind of came through and I decided to turn that into a business. What I was doing was I was curating succulent and cactus designs, and I was going around the Southern California area and selling them at shows, at local like craft shows. And I found myself though, when I would get to those shows, that I wasn't spending much time at my booth. I was in fact just walking around and getting to know it was mostly all female entrepreneurs who were there. And I wanted to know their stories and I wanted to know where they came from. And they all had a story of like how they had come from a different job or a corporate situation. And that's kind of like when I realized like, oh, it's not about me actually like making these designs. It's about me connecting with these women. And so that's when I realized like, okay, this is why that happened. And it was important for me to, start to create a social space for all of them to connect. And so that's how Quench initially started is I just really wanted to be an outlet and a space for women to lean on each other. We all have so many amazing strengths. Like I might be really, really great at something in my entrepreneurial field and you might be great at another one. And if we work together, we're that much stronger. And I think for a long time in that female culture, even in just the last like 5-10 years, that's a really new concept to women. And working together and, community over competition and that sort of thing. And so I felt like if I could provide that for women and lend them my expertise of events or my marketing background or social media or whatever that was, then I was helping them take their business to the next level. Quench of course looks differently now, whereas like I helped them to build systems to actually better their business, but also banish burnout and make sure that they're putting themselves first. But that's really how it popped up in the weirdest possible way, but in a very nourishing, nurturing way.
I love it. And it's really like so symbolic of what the conversation in this space, about moving from fear to trust and actually being able to like, sometimes we're brought to our knees by, our health, mine is a similar story that I had that whole health breakdown as well. But then it's actually about being able to trust that you actually can do it in a nourishing way, that you can do it in a gentle way, because I think we're very much conditioned into like, we have to work hard and we have to prove our worth. And there's a huge thing of like this addiction actually to doing and constantly overproducing. And it's like, and like what you're saying, actually saying, going into your garden, putting your hands in the dirt, bringing, because nature is who we are. Like we find ourselves in nature. And I think when we tune back into that rhythm of nature, that's where all the, everything works out, like when we actually align with that natural rhythm.
Absolutely. And I think that was it, is I had gotten so far away from that, just from not moving my body like the way that I needed to. And I was putting it through these really hard, intense workouts. And I probably just really needed to be in a super like gentle yoga class because my body was begging me to slow down. And, my immune system just like couldn't keep up with that. Or when I was just, eating a packaged food from Starbucks every day because I was loading up on my like every 3 hours of caffeine and not like feeding it the nourishing or seasonal food that it needed to actually get through the day and to like take those vital minerals and vitamins to like actually heal me and make me better. And just like you said, I mean, getting back into your rhythm and finding your flow is something so important. I think every female can has a story of that, whether it's that they felt like they really lasted after they had children and then they found it, or before, through a job, through a project, I mean, through a relationship. We've all been there. And so it truly is about giving yourself the space and time. And that space and time can be so dang uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
I just couldn't be with myself most days because I
Yeah.
felt like you said, I wasn't worth being, it wasn't worth, you know, if I'm not behind a desk and I'm not making impact in that way, like, what am I doing here? I mean, I'm just like putting my hands in the dirt all day in the backyard. My husband would get home and he'd say, what did you do today? And I said, oh, you know, I cleaned up the backyard. I made a few arrangements and propagated some new succulents. And he's like, that's great. And I'm like, really? Because I feel like I got nothing done. And so it was every single day. I didn't realize it, but I was like really, really, truly nourishing myself and building myself back up.
Yeah.
And as uncomfortable as that felt, that's where the change happens, in those really, really uncomfortable moments. And we have to allow ourselves to do that and give ourselves the space and time to do so. So I'm a big believer in that.
And what would you say to somebody listening who is struggling with like feeling like everything is so busy and they're, you know, the demands of their job and then family and then trying to keep fit and, you know, all the different things? What would you say to somebody who is in that kind of space of it's all just too frantic? What would you say is the kind of first step for them to just creating this new way of actually being?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the very, very first thing, I mean, there's so many deep roots hanging there, but I think that the low hanging fruit that you can really take a look at is sitting down by yourself. That means that you have put it on the calendar. That means that you're going to your local coffee shop. You have absolutely no distractions. You are maybe sending everyone out of the house so you can have the time alone. And sitting and looking at both like that side of work, career, and life. And I want to know like where you fit into that. And you're finding the time, most of the time when we feel so stripped away from ourselves, it's because we've gotten so far away of putting ourselves first. And so and that happens naturally. That's like kind of how we're built as females, but it's really about like shifting the culture of your life. And we live in such a fantastic time because it's happening everywhere all around us. But I want to know where you fit into every single day. And that doesn't have to mean, I think, in the way of, you know, self-care is such a buzzword and it's something that I love and subscribe to wholeheartedly. But I think that sometimes people feel overwhelmed by it because they it's like, oh, I have to, it takes time to go and get a facial, or it takes time to go and get my nails done. And I'm here to say like, that is self-care, but that does not have to be your self-care. Like self-care for you can be 15 minutes of just breathing. It can be reading a chapter of a book. It can be taking a long bath. It can be calling a friend that always makes you feel really good. And the entire point of all of it is to ensure that you're being intentional with your time, both in your life work. And I think that when you start to feel that busyness, that anxiety of that energy coming up, is because we're doing too much. We're multitasking, which I don't believe in. I do not subscribe to that idea at all.
Yeah.
When we're doing so many things at once, that means that we can't put all of our effort into anything, which means we lose all intentionality over everything. So that means that, like, I want you to start with square one, go back to you and where you are being intentional with your time. And when you do that, especially, you know, if you're dealing with things like anxiety or depression, when you are being intentional and setting aside that time for yourself, and it's just like meditation, like start small, start with 5 minutes, then move it to 10 minutes, then move it to 15 minutes and work up to an hour. And what are you doing for yourself that brings you back to the present? And that is so much about what being intentional is about. And if you were to start anywhere, I would say that, like when I work with my clients or in groups, that is what I tell them, is like, where are you in this equation? And if you can't find yourself, I mean, even if you're sitting here saying, I'm a single woman, I don't have children, that doesn't mean that you're not making time for yourself. That doesn't mean that you're not exerting your energy elsewhere. So square one is find yourself, and know that that time that you are dedicating to yourself, whether it's 5 minutes or 1 hour, is not selfish. In fact, it is absolutely essential to your well-being. Like we tend to not take care of ourselves until we have a massive breakdown or a really, really terrible diagnosis. But the great part is that we can do so much in preventing that. It's just like preventative care, right?
Mhm.
And we don't, so much of self-care is actually truly caring for our mental health. And
Yeah.
it's, people have to understand that you don't have to have a mental illness to take care of your mental health. That in fact should just be something that we do every single day, just like making our bed or putting on a pot of tea or whatever that is. Like that should just, I really hope that shifts in the future, is that is just something that we do every single day as part of our routine.
A huge thing that's actually come into the conversation, because I work with clients and I've been giving workshops recently as well, is being able to actually create boundaries. Because I think, especially with like phones and technology, people are feeling like they have to be on all the time. And not only that, but like with other people, that there's almost this expectation that we're also available, like that you have to respond and you have to text back, you have to email, So I'd love you to talk about like creating those boundaries and how to start when you are a person who is a people pleaser and you find it hard to set those boundaries.
Yes. And this is coming from like the people pleaser of all people pleasers. So
Yeah.
I am so happy that you asked this question, because I think that even people who maybe like don't categorize themselves as people pleasers, we all have a little bit of that in us.
Mm-hmm.
It's just part of it's just part of who we are.
Yeah.
So the number one thing that I would say is so beneficial in assessing an inquiry for your time. So that's truly what this is, right? So when someone says, oh, hey, can you join me for X, Y, and Z? Or, I have a lot of parents that are like, I have, I think 12 birthday parties this month, and I don't know how to say no to them.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have, every single week I've realized that I'm sitting through so many meetings at work that I'm actually not able to get any of my work done.
Mm-hmm.
So many different inquiries from our time, from personal and professional. So here is what this is a little recipe that I love to do. And I do this quarterly, and this is part of my programming and will be part of the planner that I'm developing that will be out next spring. So such a big part of it is defining your personal values and your professional objectives. And I want you to do this quarterly. So the reason we do this quarterly is because quite literally things change, right? And think about how things change on like just, even 30 days apart. It's just like, it looks so different. And I think that, I'm not a big believer in like New Year's resolutions and setting those for an entire year, because that feels so unattainable.
Yeah.
And what you're doing when you're doing this quarterly is you're setting yourself up for success. You're giving yourself some guiding lights, and then you're naturally setting boundaries. So what that looks like is, in this season of life, for example, I got married about 7 months ago, and I was kind of a crazy person during the planning process. And I realized after the wedding that I really, really, really want to be super present in the season of being a newlywed. And so I want to make sure that, we're sticking true to our date nights, so in this season of being a newlywed, it is so important that I am available for my husband, and that I'm giving that quality time and attention to our relationship, because that's really important for me to nourish that. Another thing is my health. I went through some crazy just health issues last year, and I want to make sure that that's really front of mind for me. I also feel like I kind of neglected my time with my family during the planning process. So making sure to see my family and my nephew and that sort of thing in this season of life is really important to me, and so on and so forth. Then on the professional side, I like to set at least 3, no more than 6 objectives, and what that looks like. And you can write them all down at first, just kind of brain dump what that looks like. I need to get my website up. I need to get, my back end e-commerce platform set up. I need to get my, my email subscription platform, whatever that looks like. And then I want you to put that in level of importance. So what that looks like, for example, you can't have, maybe your e-commerce site set up unless you actually have your website set up. So you want that website set up, then the e-commerce side. And then once you feel like you have those things loaded and ready to go, then you can send the newsletters, because you're able to actually redirect them to your website, that sort of thing. So when you're setting those professional objectives, those personal values are your guiding lights. So when you have an inquiry for your time, and someone says, hey, can you join me at this concert? And it's like, you know what, as much as I want to do that, at this season of my life right now, it's not going to be forever. And it's not that you're never going to go to a concert again. It's just that in this season of my life, I really need to focus on X, Y, and Z, or I really need to focus on X, Y, and Z. And saying no is so hard, but you know what? When you say no and you are super, super clear on your no's and you're super, super clear on your yeses, it gives you this freedom that is untouchable. Like you never even knew it existed. And if your friends and your family are really truly supportive and love you, they're always, always, always going to be okay with you saying no to their inquiry. And of course, there's a way to do it with kindness and respect, that you really thank them for the inquiry. But the fact that sometimes it just needs to be that you are slowing down to define those values, and especially as we're moving into a new year, defining those values and defining those objectives. And that right there is your North Star. That's how you decide, like, all of that noise and all of that busyness, like this is how you get intentional with your time. And this is where you know where it's being spent. And of course, again, it's going to feel uncomfortable, but what you're doing and how you're honoring your choices and your values. So like if your family is one of your values, how you're honoring your family is exponential. And the season of growth that you might go through with that I'm honoring the season of being a newlywed or a new mom or whatever that looks like, or a budding entrepreneur. I mean, there's nothing than the feeling of closing out a quarter and looking back and going, wow, like I achieved all of that. And that feels really good. And now we're on to the next thing. And I can be super intentional with that. So yeah, that's what I would do. And I have some resources too that I'll make sure to share with you for your audience, that they can kind of work through that.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I love that answer, because that just makes so much sense, because it's like, of course we're going to be overwhelmed and busy and all the things flowing in when we don't have that clear picture and we don't have that container. And so like that 3 month, that quarter container is just like, oh my gosh, you can actually breathe, because you're like, you don't have to put all the things in. You can just create that space for what it is you need to do, but also then you can create the space for your own self, for sleep and exercise and eating properly and not skipping meals, and you know, all the things that we do when we don't have that clear picture.
Exactly. And if someone had come to me and told me like, gosh, like last year, I just, you know, if I was talking to myself 12 years ago, like I'm exhausted, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. I mean, like that would mean that those would be in their value systems, like those things like sleep and those things like nourishment, because those are going to the top of the list, because your body is like crying out for that. Your body is really into that. And so if we can spend a season on like really, really prioritizing that means in the next season, meaning the next quarter, your body already knows what's going on. And then it's just becomes part of your normal daily pattern and your normal daily routine. And it's ritualistic. And that's exactly, like rituals are sacred. And so you treat it like that. And so then those things are non-negotiables for you, right? Like properly feeling your body and moving it and so on and so forth. So
yeah, I love that. That's so good. Yeah. And it makes it so simplified.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing is, you know, when you say, sometimes when people hear the word boundaries, like you said, I think it's so important. I'll say to people like, oh, it sounds like we need to set some boundaries. And they go, oh, you know, it's kind of scary, but it's like taking that completely out of the equation. What happens is you create these natural boundaries that really, again, are just more guiding lights. And you'll know if you are off balance with those boundaries, if you aren't staying true to them, because you've defined them. And also I think knowing that they're like not forever and they're constantly changing is helpful too for the person afraid of commitment.
They're like, I have to do this forever. I can't see myself doing it forever.
Right.
I'd love to hear about if you have any specific like morning routine, like what things help you like set yourself up for feeling good and just being successful and focused on the day.
Yes, this is such a great question. I love this. I think that creating your own specific routine is such an important thing. And again, it becoming somewhat ritualistic so that it's really sacred is so important and so cool and such a gift to be able to have that. So what mine looks like is I definitely am a morning person. I will preface saying with telling you my routine was saying that I do like to be up between like 6 and 7 a.m. 7 is kind of late for me. And when I wake up, I actually shouldn't say love. I can't really function without my matcha. I'm a big matcha drinker. I was a coffee drinker for a long time, and occasionally I'll still have coffee, but I found that having matcha really like sustains my energy all day. And I then don't have like that. Was used to have this crazy dip at like 3 p.m. and I would be craving sugar and that sort of thing. And when I have matcha, I don't have that. So I have a matcha that I make that is warm, and I make it with some homemade almond milk and collagen, which I love, has been like a huge help for me in restoring just the health and wellness of my body. So I make that every morning, and I will sit down with it, and it's just like so peaceful and so wonderful. And I love to take a few moments to journal when I drink my matcha. At this point, like, I still typically haven't touched my phone. I will use my phone as an alarm clock, but then I kind of just put it right back down. I kind of think of it like, people tend to get stressed out by that. And I kind of think of it like, oh, how exciting then to open up, your social media or and then to see what is on, the day, on the docket for the day. But I will say the night before when I go to sleep, I always make a list if there's anything in my brain. I should have said that to begin with. That my daily routine really starts the night before, when I write down if there's anything just left in my brain that's really bothering me, or I can't get it off my mind, or might keep me awake. I found that it has improved the health of my sleep so much. And if there was anything if I want to just make a little list of, okay, tomorrow this is what I'm doing, and I get a really good time of, maybe there's a really specific time I need to be awake, or something along those lines, that helps so much. So I'll take that same journal that I wrote in from the night before, and journal just for the day. Like if I had any dreams that I wanted to remember, or just how I'm feeling, I always write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And those can be people, places, things. I like to always ask myself, what if the only things that we had tomorrow were the things that we said that we were grateful for today. So that's a long list. I mean, there would be like mascara on there and like all kinds of things, but I like to kind of ask myself that question and see what comes to mind. And I also believe in acting on gratitude. So I'd love to sit down and write out like a handwritten card, or send a voice memo or a text message. If I'm thinking of someone, I usually feel like if someone's popping up in my head, that I need to contact them. And so just saying, hey, I hope you have a great day. I just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of you. You're amazing. And sometimes I even like to say, this doesn't require a text message back. People, of course, have a lot of things going on in their life. And then once I've sat with my matcha and my journal, I always get up and move. So whatever that looks like. So I usually take the dog and go on a walk at least 30 minutes. Like, I just believe in moving your body every single day. I have come from a long time. I was kind of brainwashed with this culture of, I had to work out for 2 hours every single day. And that was the only way that I was going to look a certain way. And then when I really worked on this personal journey of shifting my mindset, I realized that it's not has anything to do with the way that I look. It has everything to do with the way that I feel. And so that makes me feel good. So whether it's that I have scheduled a Pilates class, a yoga class, I'm going for a walk. We're lucky enough to live close to the ocean. And I love to go and have a few moments of ocean therapy, as I like to call it. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll definitely see that from time to time. And when I get back from whatever movement that is, I love to make a nourishing breakfast. And I kind of let that, and I love meal planning, but I kind of will give myself a few options in the morning, whether that be a smoothie, oatmeal, a little scramble, whatever that is. And then I would say by 9 a.m. I'm in my chair and ready to go for the day. And I've already feel so filled up. And I've already taken moments for myself of self-care and nourishing and moving my body. And that feels so good. One little tip that I love to do at the beginning of every week is during my morning routine, I love to throw on an at-home face mask. And it's amazing. People think they have to make face masking this big production, but really if you just throw on a face mask while you're doing your morning routine, that's 30 minutes of a face mask that you've had on. And skin feels fantastic. So I love to do it on Mondays, like, face mask Mondays. It always feels right. And it's a great way to kick off the week. And also remind you that like Mondays don't have to suck. Mondays are a gift, just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
every day. So yeah, those are a few little things that I like to do that are my rituals.
I love it. So tell me about your planners. That's coming out next spring. So what's that going to be like? And yeah, what's the idea behind it?
So it's been a long time coming. I feel like as a very type A control freak planner, I mean, I was an actual planner for so long. I was known to like, every November when I knew kind of the end of the year was coming, I would start to walk into stores and look at planners, and they just like, wouldn't have exactly what I needed. And I'm left-handed, and so like the way that some planners are even set up, they can be like difficult for me to write in, and I kind of have big handwriting, and so they didn't always fit my fancy. And some seasons I wanted them to fit in my purse, and some seasons I wanted it to be on my desk. And so I just like never really felt like there was something that satisfied the need for me to be really successful, and not just be successful, like feel on top of my day and make it feel beautiful. And there is a busyness to planners these days that I feel like it's really beautiful, but not always super necessary. Like I want people to open up their planner and feel confident and strong and like they can take on their day, not like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do, I don't know how I'm going to get this done. And so sometimes the busyness around that can definitely feel like that. So it has been a long time coming, and I have been formulating it. It's, specifically geared towards female entrepreneurs, and there is some really, really wonderful goal setting opportunities in there. And then also as females, I'm sure, as we can have different times of the month when we are more productive than others. Sometimes in the month when we need to go inward, when we're much better outward. What might be best for a podcast interview, it might be best for brainstorming, for being creative, and so on and so forth. And this is a conversation I'm like so excited that we're finally having as a culture in this society. And there is some amazing players in the games like Claire Baker and that are having this conversation. And of course, Alyssa Beatty, who wrote Women Code, and she is like so incredible. And I think so many of us women are on that journey, realizing that when we heal our hormones, that we're able to do things like have families and like find this source of energy that we didn't realize that we had. But especially because when you're a female entrepreneur, you make your own schedule, you're able to do that. If you just find that like there's so much power in the pattern of knowing where you're going. And so there is a lot of alliteration there, but what that means is if like, what, I'm the best in like the second week of every single month. And if I'm working on writing a book, like that is when I really need to hone in on that, versus feeling bad for yourself or feeling frustrated when you get to that third week of the month and you're like, why can't I do this as well as I did last month? I mean, I used to do that to myself all the time, even with movement. Like, why was it that I showed up to my spin class at 6 a.m. every morning, but you could not pay me $1 million to do it this week? And it's because our energy levels, our hormones are such amazing guides to our source of energy and to what we are capable of. So I feel like a lot of it is like kind of give yourself a break and set yourself up for success. And this planner will be such a great tool for that. And, Quench truly is set up to provide tools for intentional living and working. And this planner will be a physical place where you can actually do that. There'll be a lot of education that comes alongside of it, both from myself and from experts that show up every single month and do master classes and that are teaching on everything that you could imagine, from financial wellness to hormone health. So it's of course much more than a planner. It's really kind of like this movement community that I believe in. I think that accountability is something that women these days I know that I want it for myself, right? Like I know that I feel so much better when, again, we're stronger together. So I want to be able to provide that platform for women so that they can feel like that. And I think having this planner will help us in doing so.
That's amazing. I love it. It's so needed. It's just brilliant that you're creating this.
Thank you. I'm so excited. So excited. I wish it was here right now.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask your final words on speaking to somebody who's listening right now, what would you say to them that will help them move from fear to trust?
This is such an important question. I feel like, I'm of course speaking to you today from a place of where I'm sitting today. And where I'm sitting today is just recently, even in the last 6 months, making a pact with myself that fear no longer lives here anymore. Like I'm 32 years old and I have let fear stand in my way for the majority of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And every single time I have gone to make that big leap or that big step, or even just that small leap, but maybe has really big impact, I have let fear and stand in my way. And typically it's fear of the unknown. It's things that are not promised. And I shared with you, I have a lot of experience, unfortunately, with death and grief. And I have just found through losing these really, really special people in my life that life is such a gift, and we are given an opportunity every single day to make it whatever we want it to be. And it doesn't have to be the best day ever. It doesn't have to be this really, really incredible experience that's over the top and whatever. It just has to be whatever you want to make it. And I think if you take fear out of the equation, as scary as that is, you are breaking down a barrier that allows you to have whatever you want. And when we just look fear straight in the face, like I like to ask myself, well, what if? Okay, so what if fear stands in the way and it says to me like, oh, you can't do that. So I ask myself, okay, well, what if I couldn't do that? Like, you're always going to find a way to knock down that fear. And even recently I was speaking at an event, and speaking can be so nerve-wracking. And for the event, I made sure to write down all of those limiting beliefs. Like, I was nervous that I was going to choke on my words. I was nervous that I wasn't going to. There is fear does nothing for us. And when we think back, I think to all the things that we wish that we would have done, or that we didn't do because we let fear stand in the way. I like to ask myself and my clients, like, well, what did that do for you then? Like, what did that do for you when you didn't do it? And I do believe in the timing of your life. I think there are the right times for certain things, but if you just keep going to launch that website, or you keep going to start that podcast, and it's truly just like you have bought all the equipment and you've bought the domain name and you've done this and you've done that, but the only thing that's standing in your way is fear, what if you just did it? Like, what would happen? And one of my good friends, Libby, she is fantastic. She always says, instead of asking yourself, what's the worst that can happen? What if you ask yourself, what's the best that can happen? And I make that mindset shift. It's so beautiful. And I heard her speak at an event years ago, and I've always kept that with me because it's so true. It's like we always come from this place of just scarcity. Especially with a website or a podcast, it's like, well, I guess what would happen is you don't get many listeners, but what if you worked on it? What if you worked really hard for people to hear it? Or what if your website, what if you worked really hard to get some traffic there? Like, these things take time. And I think the more that we nurture, just like ourselves, the more that we nurture those things that we want really badly, the more that we can look fear in the face and say, like, sorry, I don't have space for you anymore. And I think you make that decision to play a bigger game in your life. And I think that does happen to everyone. And even if you're making a decision, just to make a decision to have a child or adopt a child, or to get a new dog, or to, take that next step in your relationship, like, those things there's fear that always lives in that. And fear can live there, but it's not allowed to drive, right? It's not like, just like Elizabeth Gilbert says, like, it's just, or Brene Brown even, like, it's just like, you can't let it have a say in your decisions. It can live there, it can sit at the table, but it can't have a say in your decisions. So I think when I kind of came to that realization is when, and it has taken a long time, obviously, but when I came to that realization, that is when the shift really happened for me. And that when I realized that if I sit here with all of this knowledge and all of this, all of these gifts and all of these, I guess, I don't want to say secrets, they're not secrets, but just all of this material that I want to share with the world, all this education, I should say. And if I just sit here with it, it's doing nobody any good but me. And I think the biggest message that I want people to hear is you were put here for a reason, and what you have, the world needs, whether it's just your next door neighbor or whether it is, the president of the United States, whether it is whoever it is. I mean, someone needs it. And chances are, if someone needs it, there's more than one person that needs it. So I believe in sharing your gifts and looking fear straight in the face and just letting it know that it cannot be a part of your journey, even if it's present.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. So Grace, let everyone know where they can find you online.
Yes. Okay. So please join me on Instagram. I am at Quench with a Q .collective. And if you want to, my website is under construction, but I please hope that you can pop your email in and I'll let you know when the website is complete. It should be done by mid-December. It is Quench with a Q -collective.com.
Oh, thank you so much, Grace. It's been a total pleasure having you on. And yeah, I just have loved this conversation so much.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for creating the space and for being a voice for all of this. It's been so wonderful. So thank you.
Thanks.